Nestled deep within a fog-enshrouded forest, miles away from the nearest town, stood the remnants of Blackwood Asylum. Once a place of healing, it had long since succumbed to decay and abandonment. Its weathered facade, covered in creeping vines and moss, spoke of countless untold stories. The asylum had become a local legend, a place whispered about in hushed tones by those who dared to remember. On a cold autumn evening, a group of 5 friends decided to explore the asylum, driven by a mix of curiosity and a thirst for adventure. Among them were Jake, the adventurous leader; Emily, the skeptic; Ben, the tech-savvy documentarian; Sarah, the easily frightened one; and Matt, who always seemed to have a knack for trouble. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and a healthy dose of apprehension, they set out on their journey. As they approached the asylum, the air grew colder, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. The massive iron gates creaked open with a groan that echoed through the trees, sending shivers down their spines. The group exchanged nervous glances before stepping through the threshold into the grounds of Blackwood Asylum. The building loomed ahead, its windows shattered, and the entrance doors hanging precariously on their hinges. With each step closer, the sense of foreboding grew stronger. Jake pushed open the doors, and they entered the main hall, their footsteps echoing eerily in the vast, empty space. "Welcome to Blackwood Asylum," Jake said with a forced grin, trying to lighten the mood. But even he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. They split up to explore, promising to meet back in the main hall in an hour. Emily and Matt headed towards the east wing, while Jake, Ben, and Sarah ventured to the west. The hallways were lined with peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and discarded medical equipment. Each room they entered told a story of suffering and despair. In the west wing, Ben set up his camera, documenting their findings. "Guys, check this out," he said, pointing to a set of rusted restraints attached to a hospital bed. "Imagine the horrors that happened here." Suddenly, a loud bang echoed down the hallway, making them jump. Sarah clutched Jake's arm, her eyes wide with fear. "What was that?" she whispered. "Probably just the wind," Jake replied, though his voice lacked conviction. Meanwhile, Emily and Matt explored the east wing, where the walls seemed to close in on them. They found themselves in what appeared to be the patients' quarters, rows of tiny rooms with iron-barred windows. As they peered into each cell, the weight of the asylum's dark past pressed down on them. "Do you hear that?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Matt listened closely and heard faint, disembodied whispers. "Yeah, I hear it," he said, trying to mask his unease. "Let's keep moving." As they turned to leave, the door to one of the cells creaked open on its own. Emily gasped, grabbing Matt's arm. "This place is seriously creepy." Back in the West Wing, Ben, Jake, and Sarah reached the operating theatre. The room was a macabre sight, with rusted surgical tools scattered across blood-stained tables. An old, rusted operating chair stood in the center, its leather straps frayed and torn. "Imagine the experiments they did here," Ben said, his voice hushed. Suddenly the room grew colder, and the lights on their cameras flickered. Sarah's breath came in short gasps as she felt an icy hand brush against her arm. "Did you feel that?" she stammered. Jake nodded, his expression tense. "Let's get out of here!" As they made their way back to the main hall, the feeling of being watched intensified. Shadows seemed to dance at the edges of their vision, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. In the East Wing, Emily and Matt found themselves in the basement, where the most disturbed patients were once kept. The air was thick with mildew, and the dim light barely penetrated the darkness. They stumbled upon a room filled with old, dusty records. Emily picked up a file, her hands shaking. "These are patient records," she said, flipping through the pages. "Look at this. Experiments, torture, even lobotomies." Matt's face paled as he read over her shoulder. "We need to get out of here. Now." A sudden blood-curdling scream echoed through the basement, sending them into a panic. They ran up the stairs, hearts pounding, and burst into the main hall where the others were already waiting, equally shaken. "We need to leave. Now," Jake said, his voice firm. "This place is too dangerous." As they hurried toward the exit, the doors slammed shut with a deafening bang. They were trapped. Panic set in as they tried to force the doors open, but it was no use. "Look!" Ben shouted, pointing to the staircase. A figure stood at the top, shrouded in darkness, its eyes glowing with malevolence. "Run!" Jake yelled, and they bolted down a corridor seeking another way out. The halls seemed to twist and turn, leading them deeper into the asylum's labyrinthine bowels. Sarah tripped and fell, and as Jake helped her up, they heard a sinister laugh echoing through the corridors. "We're not alone," she whispered, her voice trembling. They burst into a room filled with decrepit furniture and toppled shelves. Ben set up his camera again, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural. "If we die, at least we'll have proof," he muttered, though it did little to comfort the others. The door creaked open, and the figure appeared again, closer this time. Its face was gaunt, eyes hollow, and it moved with an unnatural, jerking motion. Emily screamed as it lunged at them, but they managed to slam the door shut just in time. "We can't keep running," Matt said, his voice shaking. "We have to find a way to fight back." Jake nodded, his face pale but determined. "There has to be something here that can help us." They searched the room, and Emily found a dusty old book filled with symbols and incantations. "Maybe this can help," she said, flipping through the pages. As she read aloud, the air grew colder, and the figure outside the door howled in anger. The walls trembled and the lights flickered violently. It was as if the asylum itself was coming to life, resisting their attempts to banish the evil within. With each word Emily spoke, the figure grew weaker, its howls turning to whispers. But just as they thought they were winning, the book burst into flames, and the figure lunged through the door, grabbing Ben by the throat. "Help me!" he choked out, struggling against the spirit's grip. Jake and Matt rushed to his aid, trying to pull him free, but the spirit's strength was overwhelming. Sarah grabbed a shard of broken glass and plunged it into the figure's back. It screamed and released Ben, who fell to the floor, gasping for air. The spirit dissolved into a cloud of smoke, and the room fell silent. They helped Ben to his feet, and with renewed determination, they made their way back to the main hall. The doors were open, and the cold night air beckoned them to safety. They stumbled out of the asylum, the weight of their ordeal pressing down on them. "Let's never come back here," Sarah said, her voice a mix of relief and exhaustion. They walked back through the forest, the asylum's dark silhouette fading into the distance. But as they reached the edge of the woods, a sinister laugh echoed through the trees, reminding them that the horrors of Blackwood Asylum were far from over. Back in their homes, they tried to move on, but the events of that night haunted their dreams, and one by one they began to notice strange occurrences. Objects moved on their own, whispers filled the air, and shadows seemed to follow them. In the dead of night, as Jake lay in bed, he heard a familiar creak. His heart raced as he looked towards his closet. The door slowly opened, and from the darkness the same malevolent figure from the asylum stepped out, its eyes glowing with an unholy light. The nightmare was far from over, and the horrors of Blackwood Asylum had followed them home.